My husband locked eyes with me and screamed, "Go to hell with that miserable brat of yours!" But the moment the judge finished reading the final decree, a heavy, profound silence fell over the courtroom. Even Mark's high-priced lawyer, with his immaculate $3,000 suit, turned pale. In 20 years of marriage, I had never seen that expression on my husband's face, a mixture of pure shock and raw terror. And for the first time in years, a genuine smile spread across my lips. But before I continue, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. We love knowing how far our stories travel. It all fell apart 3 months ago, on an ordinary Tuesday. I was finishing up dinner when Mark came home, much earlier than usual. It was strange. He normally stayed at his office until 9 at night, sometimes later. In recent years, we rarely had dinner together. I remember I was chopping carrots when he walked into the kitchen. "We need to talk, Elena." Something in the coldness of his voice made a pit form in my stomach. I put down the knife, wiped my hands on my apron, and sat down at the table. Mark remained standing, arms crossed, refusing to look me in the eye. "I'm leaving." 2 words. Just like that. As if he were telling me he was going to the grocery store. "What?" was all I could manage to say. "I don't want this marriage anymore. It's over. I don't feel what I used to feel. I'm in love with someone else." The world stopped. 20 years of a life together, reduced to a few sentences thrown at my face like stones. I looked at the man in front of me, trying to recognize the young man I fell in love with 2 decades ago. I couldn't. "Who is she?" I asked, surprised by the calmness of my own voice. "Does it matter?" "To me, yes. It matters." He sighed, irritated. "Chloe, my assistant, of course. The 27-year-old he had hired 6 months ago. Pretty, with that vibrant energy I had lost somewhere between raising our son, taking care of the house, and managing the finances of Mark's real estate development company in the difficult early years of the business. "Mark, we have a son. We have a life together. We built all of this. And you'll get what you deserve," he interrupted. "I'll be fair, but my decision is made." That same night, he packed a bag and left. When Leo, our 18-year-old son, came home from a friend's house, I had to explain that his father had left us. His look of confusion turned into rage, then into pain. We sat together on the sofa, late into the night, in silence. The following days were a blur. Mark sent his lawyer over with the divorce papers. The terms? I would get a minimal alimony payment and a small apartment on the outskirts of the city. Everything else, the house we lived in, the development company, the cars, the savings, would stay with him. After all, according to the documents, he was the one who had worked to get all of it. I was just a housewife. 20 years of my life, erased in an instant, as if I hadn't sacrificed my own career so he could build his, as if I hadn't sold my grandmother's jewelry to finance his first venture when we were just starting out, as if I hadn't stayed up late, night after night, organizing the accounts, creating spreadsheets and dealing with clients while he was out on job sites. I consulted 3 different lawyers. They all said the same thing. It would be an uphill battle. Without documented proof of my contributions, with everything in his name, I would likely only receive the bare minimum. Clara, my best friend since college, was outraged. "You can't accept that, Elena. He would have nothing if it weren't for you. What can I do?" "I have no way to prove it," I replied, exhausted. "Hire Isabella Reed," she said with conviction. "She's fierce. I've seen what she does in court. If anyone can help you, it's her." Isabella Reed was known as the lawyer for impossible causes. She didn't have the status or the resources of the firm representing Mark, but she had something more important, a passion for justice and an intellect as sharp as a razor. When we met, she didn't give me false hope. "It will be difficult, Mrs. Sterling, but we will fight with everything we have." And so our legal battle began. We gathered all possible evidence of my contribution over the years. testimonies from former employees who saw me working at the company, photos from events where I was clearly participating as a business partner and not just a supportive wife, and records of deposits I had made into Mark's personal account at the beginning of our marriage. Meanwhile, life continued at a strange pace. Leo withdrew into himself, dedicating himself to his studies with an almost sickly intensity. Mark rarely called him. When he tried to visit, Leo refused. The wound was too deep. A month after Mark left home, I went to the mall and saw her, Chloe, walking hand in hand with him, laughing. She was wearing a bracelet I recognized immediately. I had seen it in a catalog I had left open on the nightstand, a hint for our upcoming wedding anniversary. Mark was never good at picking out gifts on his own. It seemed he had learned with her. I hid behind a column, feeling my heart break all over again. 20 years, replaced in the blink of an eye. That night I cried until I had no more tears left. Then I got up, looked at myself in the mirror, and made a promise to myself. I would not be defeated, not after everything I sacrificed. The divorce process dragged on slowly. Mark became increasingly aggressive in the negotiations, as if each passing day made him more determined to leave me with nothing. The man who once promised me eternal love now seemed to hate me with the same intensity. He's scared, Isabella told me one afternoon. Men like your husband become dangerous when they feel they're losing control. And then, 2 weeks before the final hearing, I received an unexpected phone call, a male voice with a foreign accent. Mrs. Elena Sterling, my name is Robert Miller. I am the executor of the estate of your great-uncle Arthur Velasquez. There must be a mistake, I replied. I don't have an uncle with that name. He was your maternal grandmother's brother. He lived most of his life in Spain. He passed away a month ago and left a rather specific will. I vaguely remembered my mother mentioning a great-uncle who had emigrated when he was young. I never met him personally. And what does that have to do with me? Mr. Velasquez left his entire fortune to you, madam, his only grandniece. Silence. I couldn't process what I was hearing. Fortune? What fortune? Properties in Seville and Marbella, various investments, some shares in companies. The preliminary valuation indicates an estate of approximately $5 million. $5 million. I felt the world spin. Why? Why me? In his will, Mr. Velasquez mentions that 30 years ago, when he visited Chicago, you were the only person in the family who received him with genuine kindness. You were very young. You might not even remember. And then, like a flash, I remembered. An old man visiting our house when I was about 12. My parents were always busy. They barely had time for him. But I loved hearing his stories about Spain, about the sea, and the travels he had taken. I spent a whole week showing him the city, taking him to places I thought were beautiful, and listening to his advice and adventures. Mr. Velasquez never forgot your kindness, Robert continued. He followed your life from a distance. He knew about your marriage, the birth of your son. He kept himself informed through distant relatives. A single week of childish gentleness 3 decades ago. And now, this. The documents will be formally presented to the American court next week. As the inheritance was received after the de facto separation, it does not enter into the division of assets in your divorce. It is exclusively yours. When I hung up, I sat on the sofa, stunned. An hour later, Isabella called me, euphoric. You won't believe this. The Spanish lawyer just contacted me. Elena, this changes everything. And it really did. The morning of the final hearing, the sky was overcast. Heavy clouds threatened a storm, perfectly matching the atmosphere inside the courthouse. My stomach was a knot of anxiety as I adjusted the skirt of my only decent suit, bought years ago for Mark's company events, where I appeared as the dedicated wife. Beside me, Isabella maintained her composure, but her eyes shone with a fierce determination. Leo had insisted on coming with me, despite my protests. At 18, he looked older, his face hardened by the disappointment with his father. "Mom, I'll be by your side," he told me as we walked through the courthouse doors. Always. Those words were the only comfort I had at that moment. When we entered the courtroom, Mark was already there, sitting next to his lawyer, Mr. Harding, a middle-aged man with a reputation for being ruthless in legal circles. And next to Mark, to my surprise, was Chloe. She wore a tight dress, her hair impeccably styled, looking at me with a mixture of triumph and disdain. The audacity, I thought, bringing the mistress to the divorce. Mark didn't look at me directly. In the last 3 months, he had transformed into a complete stranger. The man who for years shared my bed now seemed unable to hold my gaze for more than 2 seconds. The judge entered, Judge Albright, a woman of about 60 with piercing eyes and a stern expression. She began the proceedings efficiently, reviewing the facts of the case. Mr. Harding was the first to speak, presenting his case with arrogant confidence. Your Honor, the facts are simple. My client, Mr. Mark Sterling, single-handedly built a successful company through his tireless work. Mrs. Sterling, while a present wife and mother, did not contribute financially to the acquisition of the assets. I felt my blood boil. Isabella squeezed my hand under the table, signaling me to stay calm. My client's offer is more than generous, he continued. A 2-bedroom apartment and a monthly alimony payment adequate for Mrs. Sterling's needs. As for Miss Sterling development, there is no dispute. It was the exclusive fruit of Mr. Sterling's labor. When Isabella stood to present our case, her voice was firm and clear. Your Honor, the version presented by my esteemed colleague is, to say the least, a gross distortion of reality. Mrs. Sterling not only supported her husband emotionally all these years, but was a fundamental part of the company's success. She presented our testimonies, photos, and circumstantial evidence of my contribution. As she spoke, I noticed Mark growing increasingly restless, whispering furiously with his lawyer. Furthermore, Isabella continued, I would like to present a new fact that directly impacts this case. It was at that moment that the courtroom door opened and Robert Miller walked in, carrying an elegant briefcase. Mark turned sharply to see who the newcomer was, frowning in confusion. With Your Honor's permission, Isabella said, I would like to call Mr. Robert Miller, executor of the estate of Mr. Arthur Velasquez, my client's great-uncle. The judge nodded and Robert approached, handing official documents to the magistrate. She examined them carefully. Her eyebrows rose as she read. These documents prove that Mrs. Elena Sterling is the sole heir to a considerable fortune, valued at approximately $5 million, Robert explained. The inheritance includes properties in Spain, diversified investments, and company shares, all legally documented, with taxes duly paid. The judge studied the documents for long minutes. The entire courtroom remained in absolute silence. I could feel everyone's eyes on me. The woman who, seconds before, was being portrayed as a dependent housewife and now appeared as the heiress to a fortune. I would like to clarify, Isabella added, that this inheritance was received after the de facto separation. Therefore, it is not part of the assets to be divided in the divorce. It belongs exclusively to my client. It was then that it happened. Mark jumped up abruptly, his face contorted in a mixture of shock and fury. This is a sham, he yelled. She's lying. There's no uncle. There's no inheritance. Mr. Sterling, control yourself, the judge warned sternly. But Mark was beside himself. He pointed a finger at me, trembling with rage. Take your son and go to hell. This is a setup. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the court reporter stopped typing, his hands suspended over the keyboard. You miserable traitor. The words escaped my mouth before I could contain them. The judge slammed her gavel down. Mr. Sterling, one more comment like that and you will be removed from this courtroom and fined for contempt. Sit down immediately. Mark sat down, still trembling. Chloe was pale, looking at him as if she were seeing a stranger. Mr. Harding was desperately trying to calm his client, whispering quickly in his ear. The judge adjusted her glasses and looked directly at me. Mrs. Sterling, do you confirm that you are the sole heir of Mr. Arthur Velasquez and that this inheritance was received after the couple's de facto separation? Yes, Your Honor, I replied, my voice surprisingly firm. She nodded, examined the documents again, and then announced, in light of this new information and the evidence presented by the defense regarding Mrs. Sterling's contribution to the construction of the family's assets, this court will take a 30-minute recess to properly review the case before issuing a sentence. As the judge retreated, I felt Leo's hand squeeze mine. I looked at my son and saw his eyes were moist, but a small smile was forming on his lips. Across the room, Mark seemed to have aged 10 years in 10 minutes. He alternated between staring into space and throwing furious glances at me. Chloe had moved slightly away from him, constantly checking her phone, as if looking for an escape route. "Are you okay?" Isabella asked in a low voice. I didn't know how to answer. I was stunned, exhausted, relieved, and terrified all at the same time. The last 3 months had been a nightmare, and now suddenly the script had been completely flipped. "I think so," I managed to say. The recess felt like an eternity. Leo went to get me some water while Isabella reviewed her notes. Across the room, Mark and his lawyer were in a heated discussion. At one point, Chloe stood up abruptly and left the room without looking back. Mark didn't even seem to notice. When the judge returned, the courtroom plunged back into silence. She settled into her chair, looked at both sides, and began to speak. This court has carefully analyzed all the evidence presented. It is clear that Mrs. Elena Sterling contributed significantly to the construction of the family's assets, not only through domestic work and child rearing, but also with direct participation in the couple's business, especially in the initial years. Mark shifted in his chair but remained silent. Furthermore, the judge continued, Mr. Mark Sterling's conduct during this process shows a lack of respect not only for his ex-wife, but also for this court. She paused, as if carefully choosing her next words. Therefore, I determine the division of assets as follows. The M. Sterling Development Company will be divided 60% for Mr. Sterling and 40% for Mrs. Sterling, thus recognizing her contribution. The main house will remain with Mrs. Sterling, where she can reside with her son. The other assets will be divided equally. The courtroom fell into a deep silence. The judge continued, her firm voice echoing through the room. As for the inheritance received by Mrs. Sterling, as it was acquired after the de facto separation, it is not part of the division of assets and belongs exclusively to her. I looked at Mark. His face had lost all color. The man who for years had made me feel small and invisible now seemed diminished, cornered. Furthermore, the judge went on, considering Mr. Sterling's inappropriate behavior during these hearings, he will be responsible for all court costs and legal fees. She slammed the gavel once, sealing the fate that Mark had carved out for himself. This session is adjourned. Isabella hugged me tightly. We did it, Elena. We did it. I was still processing what had happened when I noticed Mark approaching, with Mr. Harding desperately trying to hold him back. Leo instinctively stepped between us. "Better not, Dad," he said with a coldness I had never heard from him before. Mark ignored his son, his eyes fixed on me. The hatred was gone, replaced by something even more disturbing, desperation. Elena. His voice was different, almost pleading. "Can we talk? We need to sort this out like adults." Isabella stepped forward. "Any communication with my client must be done through my firm, Mr. Sterling. This is ridiculous," he exclaimed. 20 years together, and now you won't even talk to me." Something inside me snapped. 20 years together, and he had thrown it all away as if it meant nothing. We had built a life, a family, and he destroyed it all on a whim. "Now you want to talk?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "Now? After treating me like garbage for months? After trying to leave me with nothing? After not even calling your own son?" "I made a mistake," he whispered, lowering his voice so only I could hear. "Chloe just broke up with me. She said this isn't what she signed up for. Elena, please, can we start over? I looked at that man. The same brown eyes that once made me lose sleep. The same smile that won me over. But now, all I saw was a stranger. No, Mark, we can't. I turned around and walked out of the courthouse with Leo and Isabella. Outside, the sky had cleared. The threatening storm had given way to a sunny afternoon, a perfect symbol of what I felt. In the following weeks, my life was completely transformed. Robert helped me with all the paperwork related to the inheritance. Isabella oversaw the division of assets from the divorce. Mark tried to contact me several times, but I kept my distance. It was as if a chapter of my life had finally closed. Leo was lighter. He continued to dedicate himself to his studies, but he started smiling again, going out with friends and planning for the future. I'm thinking of studying architecture, he told me one night over dinner. I thought you wanted to go into medicine. That was to please Dad, he admitted. Architecture has always been what I wanted. A month after the hearing, Robert invited me to go to Spain to see the properties that now belong to me. At first, I hesitated. I had never traveled abroad. I had never done anything so grand on my own. You should go, Leo insisted. See a bit of the world. You spent so much time taking care of everyone that you forgot to live, Mom. He was right. For years, I had lived for others. First Mark, then Leo, then the company. I always put my needs, my dreams, last. We decided we would make the trip together during his school break. It would be our first big adventure, just the two of us. Before we left, one last loose end needed to be tied up. Mark had asked to meet in a neutral cafe to talk civilly. Isabella advised me to accept. It was better to keep things amicable, especially for Leo's sake. I chose a busy cafe downtown. I arrived a few minutes early and ordered a cappuccino. Mark appeared on time, looking dejected. The elegant suit he used to wear now seemed too big for his frame. "Thanks for coming," he said, sitting across from me. I nodded, waiting for him to continue. "Elena, I know I messed up. I was selfish, cruel. I have no excuses." I remained silent. What response could I give to that? Chloe. She was only interested in the money. As soon as she realized I'd lose a significant part of the company, she disappeared. I saw her last week with one of our wealthiest clients. I felt a pang of pity, but I was surprised to realize there was no longer any resentment, just a deep indifference. "What do you want, Mark?" He took a deep breath. I wanted to know if there's any chance, any possibility at all that we could get back together, be a family again. I looked at the man who was once the center of my universe. I remembered the good years, the shared dreams, the struggles and achievements, but I also remembered the ease with which he threw it all away, the cruelty with which he treated me, the coldness with which he ignored his own son. "No, Mark, we can't." He looked down. "Are you going to sell your part of the company?" So that was it. He was worried about the business. "I haven't decided yet," I answered honestly. "For now, I'll keep my shares. The company is doing well, and it's a good investment." He nodded, seeming both relieved and disappointed at the same time. "And Spain? Are you really going?" "Yes, Leo and I are leaving next month. We're going to see the properties, spend some time there. Are you moving there?" "I don't know, Mark. I'm learning not to plan the future so much, to live one day at a time." We finished our coffee in silence. When we said goodbye on the sidewalk, there was a finality to the moment that we both felt. "Take care, Elena," he said. "You too, Mark." I walked away without looking back. A part of me was sad, not for the end of the marriage, but for the end of an era, for the dreams that would never be realized, for the plans that would never leave the drawing board. But another part, a part that was growing every day, was hopeful. For the first time in decades, my future was mine to shape. I was no longer just Mark's wife or Leo's mother. I was Elena, a woman with resources, with possibilities, with a whole world to explore. The night before our trip, Leo and I had dinner at home. The same house I almost lost. which was now truly ours. We had redecorated some rooms, changed the furniture arrangement, transforming the space into something new. "I'm proud of you, Mom," Leo said suddenly, "for the way you handled all of this, for how you didn't give up." I smiled at my son, this young man who had become my rock during the most difficult times. "I learned that we're stronger than we think," I replied, "and that it's never too late to start over." Later, alone in my room, I looked at the half-packed suitcase on the bed. Passport, tickets, documents, clothes, everything ready for a journey I never imagined I would take. Next to the suitcase was a photo of me when I was 12, with my great-uncle Arthur. I barely remembered that encounter, but apparently that week of childish kindness had deeply marked the man. Small acts of kindness, I thought. We never know how they come back to us. That night I slept without dreams, without nightmares, without waking up startled as I had for months. For the first time in a long time, I slept with the certainty that, whatever the future held, I would be okay. The next morning, we left for the airport. A new life was waiting on the other side of the ocean, maybe temporary, maybe permanent. The important thing was that, for the first time, the choice was mine. "Ready?" Leo asked as we boarded. I smiled, squeezing his hand, more than ever. The plane took off, leaving behind the city that had been my home for my entire life. Through the window, I saw the clouds, the endless sky, and I felt a freedom I had never experienced before. Mark had told me to go to hell, but instead, I found my own paradise. Spain welcomed us with a brilliant sun and a sky of a deep blue I had never seen before. The air had a different scent, a mix of sea breeze, flowers, and something indefinable that I could only describe as new. Robert Miller was waiting for us at the Seville airport, a dapper man in his 50s with a kind smile and attentive eyes. He led us to a gleaming black car where a uniformed driver was already waiting. "Welcome to Spain," Robert said as we settled into the back seat. "Mr. Velasquez would be very happy to know that you're finally seeing his properties, Mrs. Sterling." It was still strange to hear that. His properties. As if I, a woman from Chicago who just 3 months ago was fighting not to lose her own home, was suddenly the owner of real estate on another continent. I fell in love with Seville immediately. The ancient buildings with their colorful facades, the cobblestone streets that wound up and down steep hills, the horse-drawn carriages that seemed to be from an old movie. It was like being in another world, another era. Our first stop was an apartment in the Santa Cruz Quarter, one of the most charming neighborhoods in the city. The building, from the 18th century, had a facade of blue and white tiles. The doorman greeted us with respect, as if he already knew who I was. When Robert opened the apartment door, I gasped. It was spacious and bright, with high windows that overlooked a stunning view of the Giralda Tower. The furniture was antique, but well preserved, an elegant mix of traditional Andalusian pieces and some more modern items. "This was Mr. Velasquez's main home for many years," Robert explained as he guided us through the space. He adored this place. He said that here he could feel the heart of Seville beating. I walked to one of the windows and looked out at the city spread before me, so different from everything I knew, so far from my previous reality. "It's beautiful," I whispered. Leo explored the apartment with excitement, opening doors and looking at every detail. "Mom, it has 3 bedrooms, and look at the size of this kitchen." Robert smiled, clearly pleased with our reaction. "There's more," he said. "Mr. Velasquez also owned a villa in Marbella, on the southern coast, a beautiful place to rest. And there's the stake in the sherry bodega in the Jerez region. The bodega took me by surprise. A winery? I don't know anything about wine." Robert laughed. "Don't worry. There are competent managers taking care of everything for years. The bodega runs very well even without the owner's direct supervision. It generates a considerable profit, in fact." In the following days, Robert showed us each property, each investment. The villa in Marbella was a seaside home with white walls and a lush garden. The bodega in Jerez was located on rolling hills, covered in vineyards that sloped down towards the river in perfectly aligned terraces. In each place, the employees and managers received us with respect and curiosity. To them, I was the mysterious grandniece who had inherited everything. I imagine they wondered how an ordinary woman from Chicago had suddenly become the owner of part of their country. At the bodega, the head winemaker, a man named Don Porfirio, guided us through a tasting while explaining the production process. This particular sherry, he said, offering us a glass of a rich, dark Amontillado, was Mr. Velasquez's favorite. It's produced from grapes grown on the oldest vines on the property. I tasted the sherry, feeling its complex flavor, the way it evolved in the mouth. I had never been a wine connoisseur. Mark always chose what we drank, usually to impress his clients. But there was something in that moment that touched my soul. "It's extraordinary," I commented sincerely. Don Porfirio smiled in approval. "You have a good palate, like your uncle." After a week of exploring the properties and meeting the people who worked in them, Robert invited us to dinner at his home in Seville. It was an elegant but cozy apartment where his wife, Maria, welcomed us like old friends. During dinner, he handed me a small wooden box. "Mr. Velasquez left this specifically for you, to be delivered when you first visited Spain." I opened the box carefully. Inside was an antique gold pocket watch with engraved initials and an envelope. I opened the envelope and found a handwritten letter with an elegant but slightly shaky script. "My dearest Elena, if you are reading this letter, it means you have finally seen Spain and the properties that are now yours. I hope you liked what you saw. You may be wondering why I left everything to you, a grandniece I barely knew. The answer is simple: because you saw me. When I visited Chicago so many years ago, you were the only person who truly saw me as a human being, not just a distant relative or an obligation. You showed me your city with pride. You told me your dreams. You listened to my stories when everyone else was too busy. For a 12-year-old girl, you showed extraordinary compassion and generosity of spirit. Over the years, I followed your life from a distance. I saw you get married, have your son, build a life. I knew of the difficulties you faced. I admired your quiet resilience. This watch belonged to my father, your great-grandfather. Wear it as a reminder that time is the only truly valuable asset we possess. Use it wisely, Elena. Live every moment. Build the life you desire, not the one others expect of you. With love, your Uncle Arthur." Tears were running down my face when I finished reading. Leo, sitting beside me, put his arm around my shoulders. "Are you okay, Mom?" I nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Finally, I looked at Robert and Maria. "Did he really watch over me all these years?" Robert confirmed. "Mr. Velasquez had some distant relatives in Chicago who kept him informed. He cared a great deal for you, though he chose not to intervene directly in your life. He used to say that each person must chart their own path." I looked at the watch in my hand, feeling its weight, its history, an object that had passed through generations to reach me. "Thank you for sharing this with me," I told Robert, "for helping me get to know a little more about the man who changed my life without me even knowing." On the drive back to the apartment in Seville, I remained silent, absorbing everything I had experienced, everything I had learned. Leo respected my silence, looking out the window at the city lights passing like shooting stars. "What would you think if we stayed longer?" I asked suddenly. Leo turned to me, surprised, like, "Extend the trip?" Not just that, I was thinking, what if we spent a year here? You could do your final year of high school at an international school. I could learn to manage the properties, get to know this place better. Leo was thoughtful for a moment. Then a slow smile spread across his face. "That would be incredible, Mom. I'd love that." "Are you sure? It would be a big change. You'd be away from your friends." "Mom," he interrupted gently, "after everything we've been through, I think a change is exactly what we need. Besides, I can keep in touch with my friends online, and it would be a unique experience before college. His enthusiasm was contagious. I felt a wave of gratitude for having such an understanding son, so open to possibilities. The next morning, I discussed the idea with Robert. He didn't seem surprised. In fact, he had hoped I would consider that possibility. Mr. Velasquez always imagined you might want to build a new life here. He explained that, as an American citizen, I could apply for residency in Spain based on my investments in the country. Leo could enroll in the international school for the next semester. As for the properties in Chicago, the house and my share in the development company could be managed remotely with the help of trusted professionals. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. We returned to Chicago to organize everything, enrolling Leo in a school in Seville, preparing documents for our move, and arranging for the house. Isabella helped me with the legal part, ensuring my interests in the development company were protected while I was away. We hired an administrator to oversee my share of the business. Mark reacted with disbelief when he learned of our plans. Spain? You're really taking our son to another country? Yes, Mark. Leo is excited about the idea. It will be an enriching experience for him before college. And the company? Are you just going to abandon the business we built? That irritated me. After everything he had done, after trying to exclude me completely, he now spoke as if we were partners. I've hired a competent administrator to oversee my interests. The company will continue to function normally. He seemed to want to say more, but he held back. Maybe he had finally realized he no longer had the right to question my decisions. Clara was the hardest to convince. My friend of so many years cried when I told her I was leaving. Who's going to have coffee with me on Tuesdays? Who am I going to complain to about work? I hugged her tightly. We'll video call every week, and you have to visit me. The beaches in Marbella are incredible. You'll love them. She wiped her tears and tried to smile. You promise? I promise. This isn't a goodbye, Clara. It's just a see you later. The night before our final departure for Spain, Leo and I had dinner at home. The last meal we would have there for a long time. The house was practically empty, with most of the furniture sold or donated. We kept only a few special pieces that would be shipped to Seville. We sat on the living room floor eating pizza straight from the box, like we used to on movie nights when Leo was younger. You know, Mom, he said between bites, I never imagined our lives would change so much in such a short time. I smiled, thinking how true that was. Just a few months ago, I was desperate, fighting not to lose everything. Now we were about to start a new life on another continent. Life is unpredictable, I replied. Sometimes, the worst situations end up leading us down paths we never dreamed of. Like Dad leaving us, Leo said, his voice neutral, stating a fact without the resentment that once dominated him. Yes, it was painful, terrible, but it brought us here. Leo took the last slice of pizza. Do you think we'll adapt there? I think so. It will be different, of course. We'll have to learn a lot of new things, but it will also be exciting. And what are you going to do with the bodega and the other properties? It was a question I had been asking myself. Until a few months ago, my life was managing the house, helping at the company when Mark allowed it, and taking care of Leo. Now, suddenly, I was a businesswoman with properties on 2 continents. I'm going to learn, I answered honestly. I'm going to study, listen to the people who already work there, and understand how everything works before making any decisions. Leo nodded, seeming satisfied with my answer. I'm proud of you, Mom. A lot of people would have collapsed after what Dad did, but you became stronger. His words touched my heart. During the years of marriage, I had slowly lost my identity, my confidence. I had become Mark's wife, an accessory in his life. The painful divorce, the fight for my rights, and now this unexpected inheritance had forced me to rediscover who I was and what I wanted. Thanks, son. That means a lot to me. We slept on the floor that night on makeshift mattresses, like campers in our own home. At dawn, the taxi arrived to take us to the airport. I took one last look at the house where I had lived for so many years, where I raised my son, where I laughed and cried. "Goodbye," I whispered, closing the door for the last time. The first year in Spain was a period of adaptation and discovery. Seville, with its historic charm and view of the Guadalquivir River, became our new home. The apartment in Santa Cruz, which initially seemed so foreign and impressive, gradually transformed into a cozy space filled with our own memories. Leo adapted with the characteristic ease of youth. The international school was multicultural, with students from dozens of different countries. In a short time, he had formed a new circle of friends and was learning European Spanish, laughing at the differences between our American accent and the Andalusian one. "They think we talk like we're singing," he told me one day, imitating the local accent with comic exaggeration. For me, the adaptation was more gradual. There were so many things to learn, so many new responsibilities. Robert became my guide in the labyrinth of owning multiple businesses. I hired a financial advisor he recommended, a Spaniard educated in London named Miguel, who had a knack for explaining complex concepts simply and clearly. "You have a very solid financial position," Miguel explained in our first meeting. "The properties are well maintained, the businesses are profitable, and the investments are diversified." Mr. Velasquez had an excellent sense for business. Under his guidance, I began to better understand the empire I had inherited. The bodega was particularly fascinating. I visited it monthly, spending days learning about viticulture, the sherry-making process, and the history of the region. Don Porfirio, initially reserved, gradually opened up, sharing not only his technical knowledge but also the stories and traditions of Jerez. On one of those visits, he took me to a small cellar where they kept special bottles. "This is our treasure," he said, showing rows of dusty bottles. "Some of these vintages are over 50 years old." I looked at the bottles with reverence, lightly touching their yellowed labels. "Mr. Velasquez used to say that a good sherry is like life," Don Porfirio continued. "It needs time, patience, and sometimes a bit of luck with the weather. But mainly, it needs love." Those words stayed with me. Time, patience, luck, love. Wasn't that exactly what I was trying to rebuild? My life, after the storm of the divorce, needed those same elements. I began to get more actively involved in the management of the bodega. Not that I had technical knowledge, that was Don Porfirio's and his team's job, but I started thinking strategically about the business. We hired a digital marketing specialist to expand our online presence. We opened the property to limited tourist visits, offering exclusive tastings. We sponsored cultural events in Seville and Madrid. Slowly, the brand began to gain more recognition. Sales increased. Don Porfirio, initially skeptical of my American ideas, as he called them, began to look at me with new respect. "You have a business instinct like your uncle," he commented one afternoon as we reviewed the quarterly results. Those words meant more to me than he could imagine. For years, Mark had excluded me from any decision related to his company, insisting I didn't understand business, that my place was at home. Discovering that I did, in fact, have a talent for management was like reclaiming a part of me that had been denied for so long. At home, Leo and I established a new routine. We had dinner together every night, sharing the day's experiences. On weekends, we explored Andalusia, the beaches of the Costa del Sol, the medieval white villages of the interior, the historic monuments of Seville and its surroundings. It was as if we were discovering the world together, mother and son, partners in this new adventure. The villa in Marbella became our refuge during school holidays. Situated in a small cove with direct access to an almost private beach, it was a place of absolute tranquility. Leo loved swimming in the crystal-clear sea, exploring the nearby cliffs, or just relaxing under the Mediterranean sun. It was there, on a golden summer afternoon, that he told me he had been accepted into the School of Architecture at the University of Seville. "They loved my portfolio," he said, unable to contain his smile, "especially the sketches I did here in Marbella." I hugged him tightly, my heart overflowing with pride. My son, who had faced his father's rejection, the turmoil of the divorce, and the move to another country, was flourishing, following his own path. "Does your father know?" I asked gently. Leo shrugged. I sent him an email. He replied that he's happy for me, but still thinks medicine would be a safer choice. Typical Mark, I thought, always wanting to control, always believing he knew what was best for others. "And what do you think?" Leo asked, watching me intently. "I think you should follow what you love," I replied without hesitation. Life is too short to do something that doesn't make you happy just because it seems safe or because other people think it's the right thing to do. Leo's smile widened. "I thought you'd say that." As I watched my son swim in the sparkling sea, I reflected on how much our lives had changed. The pain we felt, the tears we shed, seemed to belong to another life, another time. It's not that I had forgotten. The scar of Mark's betrayal would always be there, but it no longer hurt in the same way. In Seville, my social life also began to blossom. I made friends with other expatriates, an American painter, a pair of French chefs, an English writer. Through them, I met local Spaniards and was included in dinners, gallery openings, and poetry readings. It was at one of these events, a photography exhibition in a small gallery in the Triana neighborhood, that I met Daniel. He was a university professor of Spanish literature, with graying temples and intelligent blue eyes. He approached as I was looking at a black and white photograph of the Guadalquivir River during a storm. It's amazing how the same landscape can look so different depending on the light, isn't it? He commented in Spanish. I turned, surprised by both the observation and his accent. "You have an American accent." He smiled. "No, I'm Spanish, but I spent a few years teaching at a university in New York." The accent stuck a bit. We talked for almost an hour, discovering common interests in literature, music, and wine. He knew the Jerez region well. His family was originally from there, and he was intrigued when I mentioned the bodega. "Mendeiros. That sherry is extraordinary." I'm impressed. At the end of the night, he asked for my phone number. I hesitated for a moment. Since the divorce, I hadn't considered the possibility of meeting someone new. But there was something about Daniel. His kindness, his intelligence without arrogance, the respect with which he treated me, that made me give him a chance. Our first date was lunch at a small restaurant on the riverbank. We talked for hours, discovering more about each other. Daniel had been a widower for 5 years. He had 2 grown children who lived in Madrid. He loved his job as a professor, but dreamed of writing a novel one day. "And you?" he asked. "What brought you to Spain?" I told him a summarized version of my story: the difficult divorce, the unexpected inheritance, the decision to start over in a new country. "That must have been difficult," he commented, his eyes full of genuine understanding. "It was, but it was also liberating. I discovered a strength I didn't know I had." He smiled. "That's evident. You rebuilt your life in a foreign country. You're managing complex businesses, raising your son alone. It's admirable." I felt my face flush. I wasn't used to sincere compliments. Mark, in the last years of our marriage, had become a master of disguised little criticisms, comments that undermined my confidence so subtly I barely noticed. Daniel was different. There was an authenticity about him that was refreshing. He wasn't trying to impress. He didn't have a hidden agenda. He was just himself, a mature man with his own scars and stories, interested in getting to know mine. After that lunch, we started seeing each other regularly. Movies, concerts, walks through the city. I took him to see the bodega in Jerez, where he talked animatedly with Don Porfirio about old vintages. I introduced him to Leo, who was initially cautious, as expected, but he was soon charmed by Daniel's easygoing nature and his encyclopedic knowledge of Spanish architecture. 6 months after we met, Daniel invited me for a weekend in Sintra, a charming town just outside of Lisbon, known for its romantic palaces and mysterious forests. We stayed in a historic inn with a view of the mountains. On the first night, after a candlelit dinner, he took my hand across the table. "Elena, I need to tell you something." My heart sped up. For a moment, the old fear surfaced. Would it be another rejection? Another abandonment? "I'm in love with you," he said simply. I didn't expect this to happen again in my life. After my wife passed, I thought that part of me had died too. "But you—" He paused, searching for the right words. "You brought the light back." I felt tears in my eyes, not of sadness, but of a happiness that almost hurt. "I'm in love with you too," I replied, my voice almost a whisper. That night, under the Portuguese stars, I felt as if a cycle had been completed. The abandonment, the pain, the struggle. It had all led me there, to that moment of unexpected happiness. When we returned to Seville, I told Leo about the development in my relationship with Daniel. We sat on the terrace of our apartment watching the sun set over the city. "Are you happy, Mom?" he asked, after hearing my confession. "Yes," I answered honestly, "very happy." He smiled, that smile that lit up his whole face. "Then I'm happy for you. Daniel's a great guy, and you deserve someone like him." "Like me?" "Yes. Strong, smart, resilient. You know, after everything we went through, you could have become bitter, mistrustful. But you didn't. You stayed open to life, to possibilities. That's incredible." I looked at my son with admiration. When had he become so wise, so understanding? "Do you think it's too soon?" I asked, unsure. "After your father—" Leo shook his head. "Mom, you spent years unhappy with Dad, even before he left. Now you've found someone who makes you happy. Why wait?" I hugged him, grateful to have such a mature and generous son. 2 years had passed since we moved to Spain. Seville was no longer a foreign city to us, but a home. We knew its secret corners, its hidden cafes, its traditions. European Spanish no longer sounded strange to our ears, although we proudly maintained our American accents. Leo was in his second year of architecture school, excelling in his studies. He had even interned at a prestigious architecture firm over the summer, where his talent for drawing and his creative vision were quickly noticed. My relationship with Daniel flourished. He had become a constant presence in our lives, a partner in the truest sense of the word. We didn't live together. We both valued our individual spaces, but we spent most nights and weekends together. The bodega thrived under my renewed management. We had launched a new line of sherries that received enthusiastic reviews and significantly increased our international sales. Even Don Porfirio, traditionalist as he was, recognized the value of the changes we implemented. On an autumn afternoon, I received an unexpected email from Isabella, my lawyer in Chicago. "Elena, I hope all is well with you and Leo in Spain. I have news you should know. Monsieur Sterling Development is facing serious financial difficulties. According to information from the administrator you hired, Mark made a series of risky investments that didn't pay off. The company is on the verge of bankruptcy. Mark tried to sell your share, the 40% you hold, without your authorization, but was legally stopped. Now he's desperate for capital to save the business. I thought you should know before he tries to contact you." I stared at the screen, stunned. Monsieur Sterling Development, the business I helped build from the ground up that represented years of my life, was about to collapse. I didn't feel joy at the news, as the Mark of 2 years ago might have expected. I didn't feel satisfaction knowing he was failing without me. I just felt a deep sadness for all the waste of effort, of potential, of shared dreams. As Isabella predicted, Mark's email arrived the next day. The tone was desperate, almost pleading, something I never imagined coming from the arrogant man who had humiliated me in court. "Elena, I hope this email finds you well. I imagine Isabella has already informed you about the company's situation. We are facing an unprecedented crisis due to some investments that did not yield the expected return. I need your help. With your share of the company as collateral, we can obtain the necessary financing to get through this difficult time. Please consider this not only for our past together, but for the future of the company we built together. I know I have no right to ask you for anything after everything, but I'm begging you, not for me, but for the employees who depend on these jobs, for the clients who trusted us, for the legacy we built. Mark. I showed the email to Daniel that night as we had dinner at his apartment. He listened attentively without interrupting as I explained the history of the company, how much I had invested in it in the early years, and how important that business had been to me. "What do you want to do?" he asked finally. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to let it sink. It would be fair after how he treated me. But another part of you still cares about the business," he completed gently. I nodded. Not for Mark, but for the company itself, for the people who work there, for what it represents. Daniel thought for a moment. You could fly to Chicago, see the situation for yourself before making any decision. The idea of returning to Chicago, of facing Mark face to face after so long, was terrifying, but it also made sense. I couldn't make a decision of this magnitude from a distance, based only on emails. The next morning, I booked a flight to Chicago. Leo insisted on coming with me. "Are you sure?" I asked as we prepared. "It's going to be awkward. Absolutely," he replied with determination. "I'm not letting you face Dad alone." When we arrived at the company headquarters, the imposing building in the business district that was once a source of so much pride, I immediately noticed the differences. The garden at the entrance was neglected. The receptionist looked stressed. The movement was minimal. The walls that once boasted photos of major projects now seemed empty. The entire atmosphere was charged with a kind of silent defeat. Isabella met us in the lobby. We went up together to the top floor meeting room where Mark was already waiting. When I saw him, I almost didn't recognize him. The man who had been the center of my universe for so many years seemed to have shrunk. His hair was thinner, gray at the temples. Deep lines marked his face. His eyes, once bright and confident, seemed dull and tired. He stood up when we entered, his gaze shifting anxiously between me and Leo. "Elena," he said, his voice hoarse. "Leo, thanks for coming." The meeting was tense, filled with unsaid emotions. Mark explained the financial situation, essentially the same thing Isabella had already shown me, just with a layer of excuses and justification. He talked about the investments that went wrong, the hasty decisions, the missed opportunities. He didn't mention drinking, but I could smell a faint scent of alcohol even at that hour of the morning. His hands trembled slightly as he turned the pages of the presentation. "What exactly do you want from me, Mark?" I finally asked when he finished his explanation. He took a deep breath. "I need an investment, a significant one. Your 40% gives you a vested interest in the company's survival." "Curious," I commented, keeping my voice neutral. "In court, you said I never contributed anything, that everything was the exclusive fruit of your labor." He had the decency to look ashamed. "I was wrong. I was cruel and unfair to you. I said terrible things, things that weren't true, like, 'Take your son and go to hell?'" Leo interjected, his voice icy. Mark looked at our son, the pain evident in his eyes. "Leo, I'm sorry, more than I can express. I was out of my mind that day." "You've been out of your mind for the last 3 years," Leo shot back. "Before that, you were just pretending to be a father." Isabella placed a hand on my arm, a silent reminder to stay focused. I nodded subtly. "I'm going to need more information before I make any decision," I said, returning to the topic. "I want to see all the books, all the contracts, talk to the key managers, and I need to know what steps you've taken to resolve the situation on your own." Mark seemed momentarily taken aback by my direct approach, but nodded. "Of course, anything you want. I have a team ready to give you full access." I spent the next 3 days immersed in the company's business, working 12 to 14 hours a day. I reviewed every aspect of the operation. I interviewed key employees. I visited ongoing projects. Leo accompanied me on some of these visits, his perspective as an architecture student surprisingly valuable. The picture that emerged was bleak, but not irreversible. The company had solid projects underway, a good reputation with certain loyal clients, and a still competent core team, albeit demotivated. The main problem was Mark, his erratic leadership, his impulsive decisions, and his growing alcoholism. On the third night, I sat with Leo and Isabella on Clara's terrace, discussing my options. "You don't owe him anything," Isabella insisted. "After how he treated you, it would be perfectly understandable to let the company sink." "But it's not just Mark and his ego at stake," I argued. "It's dozens of families who depend on these jobs, projects that affect entire communities." Leo, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "You've already made your decision, haven't you?" I looked at my son, surprised by his insight. "I think so." He smiled. "I knew you would, not because you're weak or because you still care about Dad, but because of who you are. Someone who cares about others, who builds instead of destroys." The next day, I called a meeting with Mark and the company's board of directors. I arrived early, prepared, confident in a way I never would have been 2 years ago. When everyone was present, I laid out my proposal. I'm willing to make a substantial investment in the company using some of the resources I have in Spain. In return, I want 70% of the shares and full control of the operation. A shocked silence followed my words. Mark looked stunned. "That means," I continued, "that you, Mark, will remain a minority shareholder. But you will step down from executive management. I will form a new board of directors and implement a complete restructuring." "You want to kick me out of my own company?" Mark asked, incredulous. "Our company," I corrected gently. "And yes, from executive management. You will continue to receive dividends when the company becomes profitable again and can hold an honorary title if you wish. But operational decisions will no longer go through you." The other directors looked at each other, clearly evaluating the proposal. It was no secret to anyone that Mark had become a liability for the company. "Why would you do this?" Mark asked, his voice almost a whisper. "Why not just let it all end?" "Because, unlike you, I never stopped believing in what we built," I answered honestly, "and because there are good people who depend on these jobs." There was a long pause as Mark absorbed my words. Finally, he spoke. "I need to think about it." "You have until tomorrow," I replied, standing up. "The offer won't be open indefinitely." I left the meeting room feeling strangely light. Regardless of Mark's decision, I had made mine. Not out of revenge or resentment, but out of a genuine desire to preserve something valuable. Leo was waiting for me in the building's lobby. "How did it go?" he asked anxiously. "We'll see tomorrow," I replied. But whatever his decision, I'm at peace with mine. We spent the rest of the day revisiting places that had been important in our old lives. The park where Leo learned to ride a bike, the ice cream shop we used to frequent on Sundays, the school he attended. It was like a farewell, a final tribute to memories that, while important, no longer defined us. The next morning, I received an email from Mark. "Elena, I accept your terms. You were always better at this than I was anyway. The company is yours to save or transform as you see fit." Mark. Just like that. The empire he had protected so fiercely, for which he had sacrificed our marriage, now handed over with a silent admission of defeat. Isabella helped with the necessary paperwork. Within a week, I was officially the majority shareholder and CEO of M. Sterling Development. I immediately began implementing changes. I brought back key employees who had been fired. I canceled unviable projects. I focused on areas where we had proven expertise. Mark kept his word and stepped away. I learned from employees that he had finally sought help for his alcoholism, checking into a rehabilitation clinic outside the city. Before returning to Spain, I went to visit him at the clinic. It was a quiet place, surrounded by well-tended gardens. Mark looked different. Thinner, paler, but with clearer eyes than they had been at our first meeting. "Thanks for coming," he said as we sat on a garden bench. "How are you?" I asked, genuinely interested. "Surviving. One day at a time, as they say here." He paused, looking towards the distant mountains. "You know, for a long time, I believed that success was the only thing that mattered, that if I had enough money, enough power, enough respect, I would be happy. And you weren't?" He shook his head sadly. "The more I got, the emptier I felt. I tried to fill that void with Chloe, with parties, with drinking. Nothing worked. I remained silent, letting him continue. Seeing you and Leo now, how well you're doing, how you rebuilt your lives without me, made me realize how much I threw away. Not just the marriage, but the chance to watch my son grow up, to build something that would last beyond money or status." There was a sincerity in his words that moved me, not enough to change my feelings for him, not enough to erase the past, but enough to feel a kind of peace. "It's never too late to start over, Mark," I said finally. "Leo is still your son. If you've really changed, if you really want to be a part of his life, maybe someday it will be possible. Not now, not immediately, but someday." He nodded, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "That's more than I deserve." We said goodbye with a brief handshake, not as bitter ex-spouses nor as reconciled friends, but as two people who had finally found a form of peace with their shared past. The flight back to Seville was quiet, both Leo and I absorbed in our own thoughts. The visit to Chicago had stirred something within us. Not regret, not nostalgia, but a kind of closure. As if the last piece of a puzzle had finally found its place, completing a picture we could now appreciate in full. Daniel was waiting for us at the Seville airport, his face lighting up when he saw us. He hugged Leo warmly and then wrapped me in his arms, kissing me softly. "Welcome back," he said, taking our bags. "I missed you." On the way home, we told him about our trip, the situation with the company, my decision to take control, the meeting with Mark at the clinic. Daniel listened attentively without judgment, offering only support and understanding. "You did what you thought was right," he commented when I finished. "That's what matters." In the following days, I dove back into my life in Seville, now with the added responsibility of managing the company in Chicago. Thanks to technology, I could do much of the work remotely, with occasional visits scheduled every few months. I hired a local operational CEO, a brilliant woman named Raquel, who had been fired by Mark years earlier and who brought with her renewed energy and innovative ideas. Under her direct leadership and my strategic guidance, the company slowly began to recover. The bodega in Jerez continued to prosper. We had just won a major award at an international wine competition, further increasing our visibility in the global market. Leo was flourishing in his architecture studies, already being recognized by professors and colleagues for his exceptional talent. He had started designing a small renovation project for the bodega's office, his first real commission, even if it was a commission from his own mother. My relationship with Daniel deepened. He had become not only my romantic partner, but my confidant, my best friend. Our lives intertwined naturally, without rush, without pressure. On a sunny spring afternoon, we were walking on the beach near the house in Marbella, where we were spending a long weekend. The sea was calm, a deep blue that seemed to merge with the sky on the horizon. "I've been thinking," Daniel began, taking my hand as we walked barefoot on the sand, "about the future." "What kind of thoughts?" I asked, feeling a slight apprehension. Even after 2 years together, a part of me still feared losing the happiness I had found. He stopped, turning to face me with those blue eyes that already knew every corner of my soul. "I would like to spend the rest of my life with you, Elena. Not necessarily married unless you want to, but together. Maybe in this house, which you love so much, maybe traveling the world when I retire, maybe just sitting side by side reading in silence on winter nights." I felt tears welling up in my eyes, not of sadness, but of a happiness so deep it almost hurt. "I want that too," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. He smiled, that smile that still made my heart race. Then it's decided. There was no formal proposal, no ring. We didn't need those formalities. We were two adults who had lived long enough to know what really mattered. The following week, I told Leo about our decision to live together. We were at the small cafe near the university where we used to meet for lunch once a week. Daniel and I are thinking of sharing a house, I said, watching his reaction carefully. Leo smiled, that smile that lit up his whole face and reminded me of the boy he had been. It's about time, don't you think? You practically live together anyway. Are you okay with that? He put his hand over mine. Mom, I'm 20 years old. I'm in college. I'll have my own apartment soon. I want you to be happy. Daniel's an amazing guy. You both deserve it. I felt my heart overflow with love for this young man I had raised, so different from his father in so many important ways. You know there will always be a place for you in our home, no matter where it is, right? Of course I know, he replied with a confidence that moved me, but I think it will be good for you to have your own space, your own life. We decided that the house in Marbella would be our main home. Daniel was already planning to retire from the university at the end of the academic year, and I could manage my businesses from anywhere. We would keep the apartment in Seville for when we needed to be in the city, for my meetings, or to visit Leo. Leo himself was excited about the prospect of having the Seville apartment more to himself, though he knew he would always be welcome in Marbella. Life had reached a balance I never imagined possible in the dark days after Mark left me. I was financially independent, emotionally fulfilled, and surrounded by people who loved me for who I was, not for what they could get from me. One afternoon, while working in my office at the Marbella house, I received an unexpected email from Mark. Elena, I hope all is well with you and Leo in Spain. Things here are gradually improving. I completed the rehab program and have been sober for 6 months, one day at a time, as they say. The company is unrecognizable in the best possible way. Raquel has done an exceptional job, and your strategic directives have been spot on. The employees are motivated again. The reputation in the market is recovering. I'm writing because I finally understood something you tried to show me years ago, that companies are made of people, not just numbers and contracts, that relationships matter more than status, that integrity is worth more than appearances. I never properly thanked you for saving the company when you could have just let me sink. It was an act of generosity I didn't deserve, but for which I will be eternally grateful. I also wanted to say that if Leo ever wants to resume contact with me, I'm here. I understand he may need time, maybe forever, and I will respect his decision, whatever it may be. I wish you all the happiness in the world. Mark. I read the email several times, feeling a strange mix of emotions. There was no more anger, no more resentment, just a kind of melancholy for what could have been, for the lost years, for the wrong choices. I showed the email to Leo when he came to visit us for the weekend. He read it in silence, his face impassive. "What do you think?" I asked gently when he finished. He thought for a moment. It seems sincere. "Do you want to reply? Or maybe meet him when we go to Chicago next time?" Leo looked out at the sea through the window, thoughtful. "I don't know yet. Maybe someday, but not now. I'm not ready." "That's okay," I replied, hugging him. "There's no rush. You decide when and if you want to resume contact." As I watched my son walk on the beach that afternoon, I thought about how unpredictable life was, how Mark's harsh words in the courtroom, "Take your son and go to hell," had, ironically, opened the way to a life much richer and fuller than the one we had before. It's not that we hadn't suffered. We suffered intensely. It's not that we hadn't faced challenges. We faced many, but we emerged stronger, more whole, more authentic. That night, as Daniel and I drank wine on the terrace, watching the sky transform into a spectacle of colors at sunset, I felt a deep peace. Not the peace of someone who has never faced a storm, but that of someone who has learned to navigate through them and found a safe harbor. "What are you thinking about?" Daniel asked, noticing my contemplative silence. "About how life takes us on unexpected paths," I replied. "About how sometimes we need to lose something to find something better." He nodded, understanding without me needing to explain further. It was one of the things I loved most about him, his ability to understand the silences between my words. "You know what I think," he said, refilling our glasses with the award-winning red wine from our bodega. "I think you were never really lost, just temporarily disoriented." I smiled, reflecting on his words. Maybe he was right. Maybe, even in the darkest moments when Mark was humiliating me in court, when I was fighting not to lose everything, a part of me already knew I would find my way back, not to what was before, but to something new, something better. "To you," I toasted, raising my glass, "for helping me find my north." "To us," he corrected gently, "for navigating together from now on." As the sun disappeared over the horizon, I thought of all the people who had helped me get there. Leo, with his quiet strength and unwavering loyalty. Clara, with her unconditional friendship. Isabella, with her fierce determination. Robert, with his kindness and guidance. Uncle Arthur, with his unexpected and transformative legacy. And yes, even Mark, whose actions, though painful, forced me to rediscover my own strength, my own identity. The courtroom had fallen silent that day so long ago when the judge revealed my unexpected inheritance. But the real silence, the silence of inner peace, of self-knowledge, of acceptance, that I only found much later. On the beaches of Marbella, in the vineyards of Jerez, in the streets of Seville, and in that silence, I finally heard my own voice. Clear, confident, true. Now, if you like this story, click subscribe. And tell me in the comments which part left you speechless. Oh, and don't forget to become a member to get access to exclusive videos I don't post here. I'll see you there.